All right, I'm currently reporting from Austin, Texas. Well, more specifically, Round Rock, which is a city just north of Austin. But anyway, we got to talk about what happened last night at the lodge. Well, let me back up a little bit. I'm here to play Saturday and Sunday at the lodge, some high stakes streams. Today is Sunday, which means I already played my first session, and it was an interesting one, to say the least. 5 hands for the most part that made up the whole night. In the first one, I looked down at 10-9 suited from the big blind. There's a raise, a couple of calls. Could go either way between calling or occasionally squeezing. This time I put on the squeeze play. Dylan, who also flew in from LA, he cold calls on my left, and we get one more caller, I believe. So we go 3 ways to a flop, which comes down ace jack 6 with 2 clubs, if I'm not mistaken. Now, having no clubs, I think, is a good bluff candidate. It's also an ace high board, which means I could have a lot of stuff. Whereas Dylan, for the most part, is only going to have top pair at best. Maybe ace jack once in a while, but it's pretty hard to make top 2 pair. So I decide to continue bluffing. I bet small. He makes the call. The other guy folds. We go heads up to a turn, which is the 7 of spades. Good card, again, because we pick up equity. Now an 8 would give me the nuts, assuming it doesn't bring in the flush. And also not having clubs or spades, I think, is the reason why this is still a good bluff candidate. So I decide to continue going for it. Could have aces, could have jacks, could have ace 6 suited, ace jack, all these strong hands myself, even ace king. So I put in another bet. Dylan once again makes the call, and my plan is to give up if one of the draws gets there, also give up on an ace, but go for it if we get a low red card. And that's exactly what happens. It's the deuce of diamonds, if I remember correctly. And well, we've got about the worst hand we would ever have in this situation, but not just that. Having hearts, I believe, is a good candidate to continue applying pressure with. He could have many hands that missed, like queen 10 of clubs, king X of clubs, all these sorts of holdings. And also, if he's just got top pair, it's going to be really hard to hang on. So that said, I put in $18,000. And we don't get snap called, but in the end, he ends up not folding. So that's bad news for me. We lose this pot for sure. In the next one, I've got pocket 10s and managed to get all in pre-flop versus a short stack who's got king queen. We run it twice per his request and lose both of those runs. So that sucks. In the next one, I've got jack 8 of clubs. I'm the pre-flop aggressor in this one, I believe, either through a re-raise or a single raise. And we flop pretty good. It's a king high board, got some backdoor draws going on, so I decide to continue betting. He makes the call, and on the turn decides to lead out into me, which I thought was odd. I believe at this point jack 10 would be the nuts, and I've got jack 8. Good removal. Also, he's not playing any strong hands this way, I don't think. Probably just top pair at best. So I decide to spring into action. Once again, I think it's a good situation to apply the pressure. I raise it up. He makes the call. River doesn't bring us any help. He checks again, and I think now it's time to go for gusto. If I had a strong hand, I would overbet the pot. So I'm going to do the same here with just jack high. I put in $10,000. He thinks about it for about 5 minutes. Tough spot for him, but eventually also makes the call. It turns out people in Texas don't like to fold top pair, which is bad when you're bluffing, but pretty damn good when you've actually got something. So that's what I decide to do in this next hand. I've got pocket 2s, and it's time to finally have something. I call a pre-flop raise. We flop bottom set on a good board. So I put in the raise right away on the flop. We're pretty deep. I'm just hoping he's got something. He makes the call. We don't get the best turn card. It's the queen of hearts. It brings in the flush, which is the most obvious draw on the flop. Also, some bad news is that he now leads out for around $7,000. Well, we've still got bottom set, which is a really good hand, and can't just give him credit for a flush right away. Also, the board could pair, of course. So I make the call. No help on the river, though. It's a black 5, and now he jams all in for like $25,000 or something like that. Tough spot with bottom set on one hand. Flopping trips, flopping a set is not easy whatsoever. By the way, if anyone got triggered that I just called a set trips, you're welcome. But yeah, it's a tough hand to make, you know, so folding doesn't seem like a fun option. But at the same time, what possible hands are we really beating that play this way? Is he really just gonna turn like ace king with the ace of hearts into some mergy bluff type of thing? I don't think so. Also, not to be judgmental, but this man doesn't really look like he's here to punt his stack away. I mean, credit to Mo. I know he's a creative player. We've played before, and he's got style for sure. But I mean, I don't know. I think it's pretty damn close. We don't have to be right too often, you know, given the price that we're getting. But also it's $25,000 and I don't really want to be wrong. So this one takes me a while to try to figure out. And in the end, I actually decided that it was so close. I mean, I could be wrong, but it feels pretty close. I thought it'd be fun to let Mo himself pick one of my cards. And I told him, if you pick the red one, I'll call. If you pick the black one, I'll fold. Which is pretty funny because he's actually bluffing, as you guys can now see. He's got ace jack with the ace of hearts. Kamikaze bluff on his behalf, but my fate has been sealed. It's time for Mo to pick a card, and he ends up picking the black card. So that means I fold. Those are binding promises. Those were all the interesting hands I played on stream. However, we continued playing post stream, and nothing really happened except for one particular hand where I opened ace king, faced a re-raise from one of the blinds. He's only got like 10 or 15K. So after he made it like 3,000, I just jammed all in, and he ends up calling with pocket fives. We run this twice too and lose both boards. So yeah, just like the pocket tens versus king queen, both are a flip, and somehow both end up going not our way, despite the fact that we ran it twice on each hand. So yeah, that's about as bad as a poker session can go. The good news is, today we have another opportunity, and I think the game today is going to be bigger because we've got Trick Time in there. He played last week at Hustler. We played a big pot against him in the previous vlog. Check it out if you haven't seen it. Terrace is also in there. Dylan is back. He's on a heater. I'm going to try to see what we can do about that. And there's plenty of other action players as well. I think Boots might be coming. It's going to be a long day at the lodge today. Stay tuned. We're about to get to the lodge right now. It is way too hot in Austin, so I'm going to stop walking around this park. It's time to play some cards. Let's go. All right, guys, welcome back. Today we are at the lodge playing some very high stakes. 100, 200 with the occasional 400 and even 800 straddle. I am in for 100K, and we're going to start things off with a super weird hand right off the bat. So in this one, I open it up to 500. I've got ace king offsuit. I'm first to act, so should be a pretty tight selection of hands here from me. Terrace doesn't seem concerned though. He raises it to 1500. Back around to me now, and already we have a decision point in the hand. Should we call or should we put in another raise? I think both options are fine, but since I was the first player to act and Terrace still re-raised me, ace king offsuit being pretty deep out of position, I think performs well as a call from time to time. So that's what I do here. Also against a player like Terrace who does like to get after it, I think it's nice to occasionally trap somewhat with a hand as strong as ace king. So we go to a flop heads up of 8-7-5 with a few hearts. I do have the ace of hearts and 2 overcards, so when I check and he continues for a small bet, I'm not going anywhere just yet. I make the call and we see the 7 of spades on the turn. I contemplate leading on this card for a little bit, but not really sure if that makes sense in this particular situation, so I check again, and this time he checks it back. River looks like good news. It's the king of diamonds, so we make a very disguised top pair, top kicker. I check it over to him though because this card should be better for him in theory, and what I mean by that is either he's going to connect with this card or he might use it to bluff. So that's what I do. I check, and indeed he does put in some chips, $2,400. Back to me now, and the question is, do we want to just call or go for a fancy check raise? And I think calling is probably the normal play. He did bet less than half pot, so we should have a few more raises than if he had bet bigger. So instead of just calling, I decide to do something a bit unorthodox and go for some value through a check raise with just one pair. Not something that happens too often, but in this exact situation, I think we can target hands like king queen, king jack. He might even be using this card to value bet a pocket pair that checks back the turn, like tens through queens, for example. So I spring into action. Worth noting, I would also have plenty of bluffs in this situation, like a 5. Might even occasionally turn a hand like ace 6 suited into a bluff, maybe ace 6 of spades, hands of this nature. I think a big size is also what makes sense here since I'm representing either something pretty damn good or just a bluff.
However, my hand is not pretty damn good, but that's just a size that I think makes sense. I guess this is kind of a merge, if you will. Apologies for using that nerdy technical term. But anyway, Terrace sees my raise and eventually decides to jam all in. Yeah, you guys see these cards on the screen, right? Queen, Jack of Diamonds. My man is going for the kamikaze bluff. And I'm not going to lie, I was not loving this situation. I mean, if you think about it, what possible bluffs would bet the river, face a check raise on this kind of board, and still decide to continue bluffing through another raise? I mean, the man either has to be lighting his chips on fire, or we are getting coolered versus a full house that checked back on the turn, for example. Maybe pocket kings. It's not impossible, although unlikely. And I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's tough for him to have a strong hand, but I think it's even tougher for him to have a bluff in this situation. So this is the problem with going for some thin value on the river with my play. Could have just called and made life easier. Instead, now we're in a miserable spot. Also not great having the ace of hearts. Maybe once in a while, Terrace turns the missed nut flush draw into a bluff. That's not possible with me having this card. So I think it over for a bit and eventually decide to let it go. At which point, Terrace proudly turns over Queen Jack of Diamonds for the absolute airball suicide bluff, which works to perfection in this hand. So yeah, we're going to start off this stream getting completely wrecked by this guy who seems like he doesn't care at all about winning this pot. Nice hand, Terrace. In the next one, once again, I've got Ace King, and despite the disaster that just occurred to me, Ace King is still a strong hand. Here, Boots raises from early position to $800. Actions on me on the button, I put in another raise. I make it $2,800 to go. Back around to Boots now, and he's got around 20,000, maybe a bit less. According to these graphics, he's got 16K. But as it turns out, and I know this because he ends up going all in, it was a bit more than that. But he does jam. I make the call, of course, can't go anywhere just yet with Ace King. We decide to run it twice, another flip, another two boards coming out. Yesterday, I lost two all-ins that were flips despite running it twice both times. So I feel like today we'll probably scoop at least one of these. Unfortunately not, that is not what happens. The funny part is even the graphics are slow rolling me. As you guys can see, it's the ace of hearts on the flop, but that's not right. It was actually a 10. So yeah, they fixed that and I lose this first board. On the second board, there's nothing going on for me. No ace, no king, no straight, no flush, no nothing. Pocket nines hold. It is the best hand by a little bit pre-flop, so I guess it's kind of fair, but it's also completely unfair. Moving right along to this next one, I've got pocket twos, and you guys know the plan with pocket twos. For the most part, it's going to be try to flop a set. There are occasions where you raise from early position and then go crazy on ace-high boards, but we're not going to talk about that right now because instead what I'm trying to do here is flop a set. And that's exactly what happens. Trick time opens up the action from early position. I call and Boots makes the call from the straddle. So three of us go to a flop, which is the stuff dreams are made of. It's king, eight, deuce with two diamonds out there. So it's a king high board, should favor the pre-flop raiser, which is trick time. There's a flush draw available, and also bottom set is the best set to have in my opinion. Maybe middle set. It's always nice to not have top set, since that means your opponents are more likely to have top pair or something like that. Boots checks it over to Trick Time, who continues for 600. I elect to just call. Could occasionally mix in a raise, but I think just calling is standard, especially three ways. Boots gets out of the way, and we see the 7 of clubs on the turn. Now it's on Trick Time again, and he does not slow down. This time he puts in $1,250. Actions on me, I'm taking a look at his stack. He's got around 8,000 behind. It's kind of an interesting spot because I don't want to raise all in and get him off a hand that he might be bluffing with, but at the same time, it would suck to call again and then get a miserable river card like another diamond or another club, maybe an 8, something that, stops us from getting max value if he's got a king or pocket aces or, just something good. Also, if we had some sort of bluff, like say 6-5 of diamonds or 10-9 of diamonds, maybe the occasional like ace deuce of clubs, these sorts of hands, we might want to jam all in and put him in a tough spot with top pair. So I think considering that we do have some bluffs in this spot, jamming with a strong hand like deuces makes sense. Could be wrong. Those are just my thoughts in real time. I announce all in. Trick time does not snap fold, but he also doesn't snap call, and that's exactly what you're looking for when you jam all in with a set. You want your opponent to call, but just not so fast that you're like, uh-oh, they might have a bigger set. Nope, not this time. He's turned himself a pair and a flush draw. I think at this point he's probably committed. A little bit concerning with the 7-high flush draw. He might be up against bigger diamonds from time to time, but he's not here to make tight folds. No one drove all the way into round rock to fold a pair and a flush draw, so I don't blame his call. So we're looking to dodge a diamond here on the river. We run it one time. It's a red card, but it's a heart. That means we win this pot. And finally, a good thing is happening on tonight's stream. $21,000 pot headed our way. In the next one, Terrace raises from middle position, and I defend the straddle with pocket threes, off to a flop on which we once again flop bottom set, Queen 6-3 rainbow. Always nice to have some value back to back. I check it over to him, and he continues for a bet of $400. And I think at this point, it's time to spring into action. We are out of position. We're up against a player who is not afraid, and also, most importantly, could have plenty of hands to mix in here as bluffs. Hands like middle pair, backdoor flush draw, bottom pair, backdoor flush draw, 5-4 suited, for example. Plenty of hands that might want to get frisky here. So with those hands in mind, I think raising sets is critical, if you will. That's what I do here. I pick a bigger sizing. Since we're pretty deep, I make it $2,000. This is where the hand gets a little odd, as Terrace does not call. He does not fold either. Instead, he puts in another raise. He makes it $5,000. I'm not entirely sure what to make of this, if I'm being honest. Not something I've seen too often. I guess the standard play is just to call, since if I were to raise again, we're probably only getting action from better sets, although maybe not. We might be able to maximize against aces or kings, but would he really be re-raising the flop with those hands? Seems questionable to me. Anyway, I just call. Turn card comes the 9 of spades. It's just a brick. I check it over to him, and now he checks it back. I've got no idea what the hell is going on. I think at this point he's either just full of it, or he raised another time on the flop with a queen, thinking that I've got 5-4 suited or some type of draw. Not too sure. But when the river breaks off, it's the 10 of clubs. I think to myself, what if I did have 5-4 suited? What if I did have one of those drawing hands on the flop that now has to bluff to win the pot? How big would I bet? And I think it'd be around 150% the size of the pot. Again, telling the story that I've made a really strong hand or I'm completely bluffing. So I do the same thing here with a value bet. $16,000 into this pot. Terrace seems curious, and I don't blame him. You know, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. The hand was really odd from the beginning, and I'm really only representing sets which are really hard to hit. So credit to Terrace for thinking about it for quite a bit, but in the end, he does end up just letting it go. And I think that makes sense, since he's got the worst ace high possible. If he had a queen, it would have been pretty sweet. Might have got some more value, but instead we just take down the 5,000 from the flop. Not complaining though, you know, we've got some value bets going here. Always nice during a high stakes stream. In the next fun hand of note, J-Win opens to 500. Lexo makes the call next to act, and I look down at ace queen. Powerful cards, so I put in a powerful raise. I make it 2,600 to go. Back around to J-Win, who now decides that's not quite enough and makes it $8,000. Lexo gets out of the way, and now it's on me. Close spot here with ace-queen offsuit. We do have position, and it's a pretty strong hand, but it doesn't play super well post-flop, despite the fact that it's a strong hand. Would prefer to be suited, would prefer to be deeper. He's only got like 37K behind. Well, actually, big cards play pretty well when you're not super deep, so I guess I'm kind of just rambling. But either way, we do have position, and I know J-Win is aggressive at times, and I think he might just be getting sick of all the re-raising that's been going on during this stream, so I decide to call and go to a flop. 10-10-7 with 2 hearts. Seems neutral. Most likely it's probably a little bit better for me, but he's still going to have a bunch of overpairs that I probably don't have super often. However, J-Win decides to check it, which I found a bit odd. Would assume he's going to bet small with all his holdings after this pre-flop action, but not the case. I put in a small bet myself. This is going to be a board where I would often protect with hands like pocket jacks or pocket nines. So why not put in a cheap bluff? We might get a fold from ace king or maybe even the same hand, and that would be a great result. Unbeknownst to me, I've actually got a very strong hand compared to his ace-9 offsuit. We're in good shape here, but he does not put up any resistance, and I am not complaining about taking down this pot. In the next one, we've got king-9 offsuit. Not the proudest pre-flop holding, but just wait till you see what develops. I raised from the cutoff to $500, and then Terrace in the small blind makes it $1,500. A very small raise. He's out of position, and we're relatively deep stacked. Only 3x though from my original raise. Not sure what to make of it, but I just keep things simple and tell myself I've got a king, I've got position, and it's a really small raise. Let's see a flop, and boy, am I glad that I stuck around. It's king-7 rainbow. We flopped trips, albeit with a bad kicker. Trips are still trips, so I'm pretty damn happy. Terrace bets small, $1,000, and this is already the point in the hand where things get unorthodox, if you will. Most people would probably just call here. Raise doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that's level 1, you know? I'm trying to take it to level 2. Since it's Terrace and we've been battling and there's a dynamic developing, I thought to myself, how bluffy would it look if I raise right away? At least that's what I'm hoping Terrace will think. So I put in a raise. I mean, yeah, those are kind of my thoughts. There's also a technical aspect to it, which is we do have to mix in some raises from time to time. I don't think it's bad if we just call every hand ever, no matter what it is. As a continue, we have no raises at all. But I do like the idea of occasionally mixing in some raises, maybe hands like 9-8 of clubs, 9-8 of spades, 9-8 of diamonds, backdoor straight, backdoor flushes type holdings. So with that in mind, I bump it up with my 3 kings and a 9 kicker. Terrace seems curious, and I don't blame him. This looks really odd from his perspective, at least it would to me. So he's got ace queen of spades. That's an overcard and a backdoor flush draw. He sticks around. Also backdoor straight draw, worth noting. Turn card is a 6 of spades, which I had no idea at the time, but it's the money card because Terrace now picks up the nut flush draw. And of course, he might still have the best hand if I'm full of it. He checks, and I now bet $11,300. Again, Terrace is not convinced, so after some thought, he sticks around, keeping me honest, which of course I'm happy to see with a king. But I do start to wonder, are we up against a better king that might play this way? And I think the answer is yeah, sometimes that's just going to happen. He might have ace-king, he might have king-queen, and I'm just bloating this pot, maybe going a little too thin with a weak top trips. But here we are, we go to a river, which is the 10 of diamonds. So the flush draw does miss, but 9-8 gets there, which I guess is the only straight draw available. Well, you also have 5-4, but questionable how often I'd be raising the flop with 5-4. Anyways, Terrace checks it again. What do we want to do here with king-9? Part of me wanted to check this back. I'm not going to lie. It seems like the safe option. Are we really just going to get called by a worse hand 3 times, especially once the pot has gotten this big? It's questionable, but here's the thing. Going for thin value on the river is just so profitable because that's when the pot is biggest. So I do like to make some risky bets that I think are worthwhile. And we are in one of those spots here. I think, I would have some bluffs. I think betting around the size of the pot would make sense with bluffs. So I'm going to put in a value bet with king-9. It's a bit sketchy. I'm not going to lie. I didn't love it. I thought he might even tank call with like king-jack. But, if we can get called by a pocket pair or even a non-believing 7, maybe even ace-high, then it would be a great result. So that's what I go for. I put in a bet of $34,000. Terrace does not seem to love it, but we don't get snap called. He also doesn't seem to be Hollywooding for a check raise, which would have made me throw up if I was honest, because that would have, just been a disaster. Similar to the first hand, I guess, but that's not the case. He starts talking and saying he might have the best hand. Sounds like good news to me at this point. I am quite happy with myself for putting in this river bet. Sure, it's easy when you have it, but I think it's also important to try to get maximum value the times that you do, and that's something I wasn't always super good at, but I've been working on over the years, and this is a good example of that. I know it's trips and it's a super strong hand, but given how the hand played out, it's still a bit thin in my opinion. Actually, it's pretty thin in my opinion. But anyways, Terrace proves all that wrong. I guess it's not so thin at all because he ends up making the hero call with ace high. That's good news for me. We are going to win this $100,000 pot. The first big pot that we win during this trip at the lodge, and things are going much better now than they did the previous day. In this next hand, we are playing the stand-up game for $500 a player, and it is down to myself and Lex O. We are the two remaining players who still need to win a hand. And what do you know, the action folds all the way around to us. He's in the $400 straddle. I am in the $800 straddle. He limps in, and I've got Queen Jack. Pretty strong hand, blind versus blind, especially facing a limp, so I decided to raise it up. With the nit game in play, this is a great situation, I think. I make it 1,600. But now Lexo goes for the dreaded limp re-raise, and that is the problem with raising hands like Queen Jack or Ace 9 offsuit or, King 10. These sorts of holdings, once you face a limp and then another raise, what do you really do? I don't know. I thought about just folding right away, then I thought about putting in another raise. In the end, I decided to just call. We've got position, and with the nit game in play, I think he could be out of line. So we go to a flop of Jack 9-9. Pot's already pretty big, but we've got top pair, so that's good. He bets small, and I don't think a raise makes any sense. Fold is out of the question, so I make the call. But then we see disaster on the turn. It's the ace of spades. Damn it. I was fairly certain that he was limp raising a hand that contained an ace. Those are the most likely bluff candidates, and also the most likely value candidates. He might have ace king, ace queen, maybe even ace jack, all sorts of big aces that might limp raise pre-flop. However, Lex checks it now, which I think is also indicative that he's got an ace because it's Lex, the guy, he likes to pot control. He plays in Florida. People play tight over there. He's got some tricks up his sleeve, and checking top pair might be one of them. So I just check it back. We see the 9 of clubs on the turn giving me a full house, but it's kind of a fake full house, And now Lex puts in a bet of nearly the size of the pot, $10,000. This is a tough spot now. It's tough for him to have a bluff given the pre-flop action. He would have to be turning a hand like King Queen into a bluff or like Queen 10 into a bluff, but we've got a queen, which is a pretty bad card to have, but at the same time we have some removal to ace queen, which I guess is worth noting. Questionable how much to really weigh that into our decision making, but these are thoughts that I do like to have when I'm faced with a tough decision at the poker table. In the end, I think it's just too obvious that he's likely got an ace. But then again, I don't know. I start to take longer because the nit game is in play, and maybe he's trying to just earn himself a way out. But this pot's so big, maybe that's not something he's even thinking about, because if he loses the stand-up game, he only has to pay like $2,500 or $3,000. Instead, he's risking $10,000 here into a pot that's already $13K. Is he really going that crazy to just avoid a bounty that's small in comparison? I don't know, guys. This one took me a little bit, but in the end, I thought paying off Lex would be worse than getting bluffed by him, so I let it go. And it turns out I was wrong. It would have been better to pay him off because he proudly turns over 8 deuce and says, I had it, which was pretty hilarious. Credit to Lex. He played this hand with style, with a lot of heart, and it was funny too. So, this is the way the nit game should be played. You have to earn it, and Lex definitely earned it in this hand. Gets me to fold a jack. We pay the bounty. Bad as it gets here. Nice hand, Lex. Next, we pick up a hand that's much easier to play than Queen Jack offsuit. We've got the number 2 starting hand in poker. It's pocket kings. In this one, J-Win opens up the action on the button. Lexo gets out of the way, and I raise it up, of course, from the big blind. Interesting thing about this hand is there was a bunch of pre-flop straddles, so my re-raise size was $8,500. It's kind of absurd considering this was supposed to be a 50-100 game. Normally the re-raise size would be like, 1,500 or something, but there must have been 2 or 3 straddles on. They're honestly kind of hard to keep track of. But either way, J-Win makes the call with his suited connector. I think, with 10-9 suited in position, it's fine to call, but the thing about so many straddles being out there is that suited connectors just become way more garbage, because the thing about these kind of hands is you want to be deep, you want to be able to cash in the times that you do connect. And since we effectively have way less big blinds now because of the straddles, these suited connectors are a lot less appealing, but whatever. J-Win makes the call. We go to a flop, which is pretty damn good. It's king high. King jack deuce with 2 hearts. We've got top set and the king of hearts. It's looking pretty good, to say the least. I bet small would do the same with essentially all my holdings here on this kind of board texture. J-Win makes the call, which I'm happy to see, and we go to a turn, which is the 4 of clubs. Now, continuing to bet when you have strong hands, never going to be a problem. I think you can't really go wrong there. But I'm looking at J-Win's stack, and he doesn't have much compared to the pot. That is one reason why I think checking is okay in this situation. If we were pretty deep, I'd probably just keep betting. Furthermore, when I have 3 of the top card, it's tough for him to have anything, so I want to give him a little bit of rope if he wants to bluff with like queen 10 suited, maybe ace 10. If he's got pocket jacks or pocket deuces, he's obviously going to bet. So good things can happen here. I check it over to him, but instead J-Win checks it back, which I'm not a big fan of. Not because, he's not playing his hand the best way. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but not a big fan of it because I want chips to go in the pot. I've got the nuts. Instead, we go to a river, which is the queen of spades. A little bit scary. He could have ace 10 suited, but, if he's got that, take all my chips. I put in a blocker bet in this situation. I feel like he's not too strong, so I want him to either call with a weaker hand that otherwise might fold versus a big bet, or maybe even turn his hand into a bluff. Say he's got like jack 10 suited. He might decide that it's better to just jam all in. That's what I'm trying to induce here, so I bet small, and sure enough, we induce the all in. He jams, and I snap call. Turns out I did not induce the all-in. What induced the all-in was the fact that my man rivered a straight on that queen with his 10-9 of spades. So maximum pain for me, top set cracked, and this nearly $80,000 pot is going to J-Win. This one hurt because I thought maybe we were going to start heading in the right direction and catch on fire here at the lodge, but instead we go right back down, stuck around 15K now, and we've got some work to do. Well, as it turns out, that work is going to be against J-Win all over again. Poetic, we give the man a bunch of chips and we get the opportunity right away to try to get him back. In this one, there's a raise from Dylan. J-Win re-raises from the big blind after Boots calls in the small blind. And I look down at ace queen suited in the final straddle. That is a good situation, my friends. Ace queen suited, one of the best pre-flop starting hands. It is a little sketchy to be up against a raise, a call, and a re-raise already ahead of me, but this is a game where people were pretty active pre-flop, so I'm not super concerned. I raise it up to $17,000. Everyone gets out of the way except for J-Win. It comes back around to him. He's got nearly 200K now. He's been on a bit of a heater, and he decides to keep the pedal to the metal by putting in another raise, but it's almost like a minimum raise. He made it 33,000. Well, can't go anywhere versus that size. We've got position and a very good hand, despite the fact that we are up against a $33,000 pre-flop raise. If we hit something, it's going to be easy to play. If we absolutely miss, it's going to be easy to fold. I am in there. There's almost 70,000 in the middle, and we're going to a flop. That's a big game. And it's a good flop. 8-7-6 with 2 clubs. We flopped the nut flush draw in a situation where I'm not going to have too many nut flush draws. And most of the time that I do have suited hands, we're not going to hit. That's just how math works. So definitely a pleasant surprise on this flop. J-Win now continues for $20,000. And we've got a decision to make between calling or raising. At this point, I only have around $70,000 left in my stack or so, which is less than a pot-sized bet. And if he's got ace-king, it would be an awesome result to get a fold from that hand. Even if we get snap-called by pocket kings, we're in pretty good shape. The only hand I'm really super concerned with is aces. And it's tough for him to have that since I've got an ace. So I jam all in. Would also be raising some strong hands for value like aces or kings myself that just flat pre-flop. Most likely I'd probably call with those hands, but from time to time might raise. So I think ace queen suited fits the bill. Turns out ace queen is also what J-Win is holding, so it would be a pretty sweet result to get a fold from that hand. And sure enough, he's got to let it go with ace queen offsuit. Not much he can do here. I turn it over and we rabbit hunt. Would have made the nuts right away on the turn, so yeah, it would have been cool if I just called. But most likely he would have shut it down, I think. Although, I don't know. J-Win was on one on this particular night. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we move to the last fun hand of this stream. And it's not anything too crazy, but man, this one had me wondering for the rest of the night. Let's get right into it. I've got ace jack offsuit. By the way, I should mention this is the last hand of the stream, and they've let us know that. They already told us that this is the last hand of the stream. And what happens on live streams is, for whatever reason, people like to lose their minds on the final hand. Not always, but I've seen it happen so many times where these guys are like, all right, this is my last chance. One last hoorah, it's time to blast off, which I think is pretty funny. But anyway, I've got ace jack. I raise it up on the button, and now Terrace re-raises from the big blind to $4,000. Could mix between re-raising again or just calling. I decided to just call ace jack in position. Would be better to be suited, of course, but beggars can't be choosers. Off to a flop, which is about as good as it gets, though. It's king 10-8, all diamonds. So we flop an overcard, a straight draw, and most importantly, the nut flush draw. A whole lot going on for me. No matter what he's got, we can't be in terrible shape. Terrace continues for a small bet of 2,300, and already we have a decision to make. And man, I don't know. I think both are fine. Raising seems cool, because if I had the flush, I might just start building the pot right away. But calling also seems good in case he's bluffing. What if he's got ace 5 suited? What if he's got 9-8 suited? What if he's got queen jack? All these sorts of holdings that might decide to continue firing as a pre-flop raiser. So I see merit to both. I decide to just call and see what happens on the turn. It's a red card, but not what we were looking for. It's the deuce of hearts, just a brick. Terrace continues betting, which I think at this point is indicative that he likely has something strong. I feel like if he was bluffing, this isn't really the kind of board he might continue going nuts on. It's also a value-looking size, right around half pot, $7,000. But either way, my hand is pretty straightforward. We've got a ton of equity no matter what, and can't go anywhere just yet, so I make the call, looking to improve on the river. Sadly, it is a red card, but once again, the wrong shape. Heart instead of a diamond. Now I'm expecting Terrace to check, and what are we going to do? Probably bluff, but maybe just wave the white flag and check it back, since we have removal to hands that we'd want him to fold, which is never great when you're bluffing. But instead, Terrace puts in a bet of $17,000, and now it's kind of like, well, we could just fold because we missed, or do we want to turn this ace of diamonds into a kamikaze bluff? The reason I don't love doing that on this river is because I think Terrace might realize if I had flopped the nut flush, I would have raised earlier. I might not have always done that, but most likely I would have raised either on the flop or the turn. So not sure how much credit we would get if we were to just suddenly raise this river. For that reason, I decide to just fold this one since we missed and I've got ace high. Turns out Terrace had pocket aces. Questionable what would have happened had he faced more aggression from me. I kind of wish, after seeing his cards, of course, that I'd taken a more spicy line, if you will. But instead, we just play this one straightforward and don't win this last hand. All in all, still a good time at the lodge, booked a win. Stay tuned for some final thoughts.
All right, so that concludes my time here at the lodge. Today went better than yesterday, as you guys saw. There was a lot of hands, which I think is often going to be the case when you play shorthanded for 8 hours or however long we played. But most of them went my way, at least the important ones, and I can't complain too much. Would have been nice to run just a little bit better, considering how yesterday went. But that's life, that's poker, Last hand, where I had the ace jack with the ace of diamonds, I'm still wondering if I should have gone for this crazy bluff where I raise the flop and just keep firing. But I don't know if Terrace is the type to fold. I don't know. I didn't want to risk my entire stack in that kind of spot. Seems like marginal at best. Would have been cool for the stream though. Would have been cool for the vlog. But either way, I'm happy to report we won tonight. However, it wasn't enough to make up for yesterday's loss. I think it was minus 80K yesterday and plus 60 today, or something in that ballpark. I'll definitely return to the lodge at some point. This week it's back to LA, playing at Hustler, I believe Wednesday and Friday. And then I'm going to Vegas for the WSOP, even though I don't really want to play any tournaments. I'm not sure why I'm going, probably just to hang out and see what happens. I'm sure there's going to be some games to jump into. That's enough rambling. As always, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for all the support. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was a bit of a long one, but there's a lot of hands, and you guys like hands. So yeah, that's that. Until next time, good luck at your local tables. I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.